Good morning and welcome to WNHH-FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our city tick. Tom Schultz is helping New Haven push the boundaries of medical research into the next generation. He is the CEO of Connecticut CT Pharma. His company just received the okay to launch a study along with Yale Medical School researchers into the medical effects of marijuana. He's here in the station to tell us about that. Thanks for coming in, Tom. What a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Paul. We're grateful for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing.
And you came from Portland, Connecticut.
That's where I started.
Exactly where in Connecticut is Portland?
Portland's across the river from Middletown, just over the Oregon.
It's not that far.
Yeah.
So you get a little taste of New Haven every day in miniature when you cross into Middletown, right? Is that Route 9 or something? Where that
Portland
bridge
is just off of Route 9, yes. The bridge crosses from Route 9 into Portland.
Okay, so what kind of community is Portland? You live there too?
I do not live there. I live right now in New Canaan.
Uh-huh. Oh, so you have to schlep. You have to commute every day.
That's right. I'm originally, though, from New Britain.
Oh, okay. So not that far away. Same part of the state.
Same part of the state.
So CT Pharma, it's a company I guess you've been... Did you start the company?
Rino Ferrarese and I wrote the application for the company asking the state of Connecticut for a license to produce medical marijuana in Connecticut.
That was 2013?
That was in 2013, yes.
So 6 years you've been at it.
That's correct.
At the forefront of a big emerging industry in our country. Try to have Connecticut be part of that, medical marijuana. And you described it to me before we went on the air, that in the emerging medical marijuana industry, you are like Pfizer, not like Walgreens. You research and create the products and produce the products for somebody else to sell, in this case, dispensaries, correct?
That's correct. There are currently 18 licensed dispensaries in Connecticut. 15 of them are operating, maybe 16 right now. And they dispense the product to the patients. We produce it. So in the grand scheme of things, we would describe ourselves like a Pfizer who produces a medicine, and the dispensaries like the Walgreens or CVS where people buy the medicine.
And you need to get approval, right, to create these products and make sure they work, right? You have to test them out.
Yes. Every product ever produced by any of the four producers in Connecticut has been third-party tested.
And there are four. I didn't know that. So there are four companies like yours.
There are four producers
yours.
in Connecticut. That's
so
correct.
What kind of products do you make? I was looking on your website. I saw syringes, oil sprays, lotions, bath salts, brownie powder, honey. Or was I reading that wrong?
That's all correct. We make 18 different types of products across probably, within those 18 types, you probably would have a little more than 100 products. That is 100 unique products within 18 categories.
And these are products to deal with health issues, I would imagine, ranging from stress to chronic pain, anxiety.
The state has approved the way our system works in Connecticut is that in order to participate in the program, a patient needs to get a card, a registration card, and that has to do with bringing a doctor's diagnosis into the state's system through the Department of Consumer Protection that administers the program. So they both license us, and they license the dispensaries, and they license the patients to participate. They register the patients. So a normal patient would go from her doctor to a state registration and then into a dispensary where she would deal with a registered pharmacist who would advise her as to what product might help her condition. In Connecticut, there are currently 36 conditions that are eligible for treatment.
Such as anxiety and chronic pain?
No.
Oh, because the guy in our office gets medical marijuana for intense pain that he has.
There are many types of pain that have been approved. So pain associated with, let's say, back surgery, that's been approved. Pain associated with intractable migraines, that's been approved. Chronic pain right now is a matter that has been approved by the Department of Consumer Protection's Board of Physicians. So it's proposed, and now it's going through the regulatory process.
Has the medical profession tried to characterize pain as another sense that, like touch, feels? They're trying to say we need to look at pain in a different way from the way we have historically, that it's something that needs treatment, that is what you experience every minute when you have it.
Yes, starting around 2000, that there's controversy around what you've just said, in that the the argument that pain should be considered independently of any other condition, let's say, is associated with the beginnings of the opioid crisis.
Right, with OxyContin.
Correct.
Right.
So that, as I said, there's
But wasn't that
controversy.
an issue of how it's prescribed, rather than whether you prescribe it, whether there was just abuse, doctors and pharmacists can make money by addicting people and giving them way too much, as opposed to what I thought the breakthrough was in medicine was that you didn't have to come up with some other reason somebody needed help because they couldn't see well or they couldn't walk. That pain in and of itself deserved, that should be treated.
That's correct. And I think that, let's say, many people would be comfortable with that statement. The issue was that that argument was part of the presentation of opioids to America. That's the issue.
But you're not involved in opioids. Marijuana is not an addictive drug, correct?
Correct. We're not at all involved with
so marijuana,
opioids.
Now you were correcting me before we went on the air. People talk about CBD and marijuana in the same breath. They both come from cannabis, but marijuana, if I understand correctly, has THC in it, whereas CBD products generally don't, correct? Don't get you high.
That's another difficult question. Most CBD products sold in America today, let's say sold in anything from a small store to a gas station, most of that is not regulated,
right,
and hasn't been tested by anybody.
And it doesn't get you high, right?
Well, it depends on what's in it.
Oh, can it have? Oh, so sometimes it has THC, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, what I'm describing when I say that most of what's sold in Connecticut today hasn't been tested by anybody, certainly any third party, whether or not the label says on it that the product has been tested, when it has not been reviewed by any third party, it's problematic. And when you buy these untested products, you're
putting yourself at risk.
Putting yourself at risk the same way you would put yourself at risk by getting your marijuana behind a fast food chain.
So now, do your products have THC in them?
Some of them, yes.
But not all?
Not all, no.
Okay, and we're talking to Tom Schultz. He's a CEO and a founder of CT Pharma, which is at the forefront of the medical marijuana industry in Connecticut, and it's got a new trial we're about to talk about with Yale Medical School. But just got to take a little more about the products you sell. Why would someone buy your syringes or oil sprays or lotions or bath salts or honey? What would they buy it for?
Well, again, within the Connecticut program, let's assume that they have one of 36 conditions. These are not sort of pleasant things to have. They include things like cancer, things like HIV, things like Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome.
Well, that's interesting. They threw that one in there.
That's been there from the beginning.
Because of the discomfort. Wow.
And it's not, again, the point here is not, it's not, let's say, what's conventionally thought of. It's not that, let's say, marijuana simply is oriented as a pain relief medication. It interacts with a whole system in the body that Americans discovered in 1993, largely by accident, like a lot of other discoveries. So the whole neural system with which the product interacts and what it does with that system it's a matter of research. It's a matter of what we're.
So it's not just about pain relief. It's not a cure, though, is it? Or do you say it interacts with other parts of your body or other substances to actually help you not just deal with the discomfort of irritable bowel or the pain you're feeling with cancer or the anxiety, but that it also actually can heal you?
Well, there are many, many, many anecdotal, let's say, stories to that effect. We're not, obviously...
you can't market that yet. But
we're not marketing based on anecdotal evidence. What we're trying to do is the research that's necessary to prove exactly what it does do.
All right, and that leads us to why you've been in the news in New Haven, Tom Schultz and CT Pharma. Last Friday at Yale School of Medicine, you can read about it in The Independent. We had a story by Christopher Peak. You got approval from the FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, and the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection to conduct the first clinical trial that involves U.S.-grown marijuana that is not supplied by the federal government. So it's not, the federal government doesn't tell you where you go for some other state to have marijuana shipped here to test whether this is going to work, that this is the first one where it could be grown right here. And you're doing that a two-part study we'll talk about in a minute from researchers from Yale's Interdisciplinary Stress Center. Why does it matter that this is the first one that involves U.S. grown marijuana, not supply by federal government? Why should we care about that?
We care because when we produce a product, just like any other pharmaceutical producer, in order for that product to have any meaning as a resolution, as a solution for problems, it has to be obviously safe and uncontaminated, pure. That's why we have it tested. But it also has to be consistent with what we can produce in the future. If we're not sure what we've produced here and we can't do it again, then it would have little value as medicine. So within the system that Connecticut set up, we are responsible for our own capacity to produce consistent medications within the Connecticut.
Meaning we want to know how the marijuana is grown. That's going to be the same marijuana with the same properties, the same conditions in 2 years from what it is today, rather than buying it from different places that grow in different ways.
Absolutely correct. And if, let's say, we in Connecticut are responsible, we adhere to the federal rules governing pharmaceutical production that are administered by the state, by the DCP. So the Department of Consumer Protection, the DCP, enforces a system of regulation that holds us to federal standards, even though the federal standards are written down. We know what those are.
So why it matters, it sounds like it's twofold. Tell me if I have this right. It matters in that for the issue of a local economy, that we're kind of, by using marijuana grown in the state, we're supporting state-grown marijuana. But also it sounded from what I read, and tell me if I have this wrong, that it's actually better scientifically to use the local marijuana, A, for what you just said, so there'll be consistency over time. We know we're getting it in the product. And I thought I also read that shipping it from a distance makes it not as fresh.
That's not really the issue. The issue with the product from the University of Mississippi, which is where the federal government grows its product, is consistency. It's both consistency and quality.
And why is it less consistent and of less quality than something we grow here?
The federal government did not set up that operation with the goals in mind that Connecticut had, that the Department of Consumer Protection had, and the state legislature had in setting up Connecticut's program. Connecticut's program is explicitly oriented toward producing consistent, replicable medicine for Connecticut patients.
And you grow this in Portland?
We grow it in Portland.
How many acres you got?
It's indoors.
Mm-hmm.
So in Connecticut, all marijuana is produced indoors.
Why is that? Just because weather conditions are too unpredictable?
It's not the weather conditions. It's the insects. It's the mold. It's the fungi that are, we're next to the Connecticut River. There's a lot of things that could cause problems there. But when we're indoors, we can control the environment. And it also means that we don't have to use anything to, let's say, protect our plants from these potential insects, potential plant diseases. We don't have to protect them because they're indoor.
So it's more organic?
It's, yes, much more.
No pesticides?
No.
And then how big an indoor grow operation is?
Right now, our facility is at 17,000 feet. We're moving in the near future we plan to move anyway. We're in negotiations, but our new facility will be at 173,000 square feet.
Whoa, that's a big change. You're doing well in Portland still.
No, that will be up the road in Rocky Hill. We love Portland. We're very happy there. The only problem is there's no suitable facility, of a sufficient size there for us to move into. So we're forced to move out.
Okay, so Tom Schultz, you're doing a two-part study, or maybe it's two studies, with the Yale researchers.
The first two parts here are both part of what is called a safety study. All phase 1 FDA studies are oriented towards safety and dosing, or toward dosing and safety, if you want to think of it that way. But the point is that you start small and you prove to yourself and to everybody else who is concerned, state government, federal government, that the product is safe. Once we get through safety, then we go to a much larger sample size, many more people involved with a phase 2. But phase 1 is always about safety.
And phase 2 is about how much you should have.
Phase 2 will be more specifically oriented toward exactly how the product addresses disease conditions.
Gotcha. So it's the first one. You got 6 double-blind combinations of CBD and THC. So some adults get a placebo, and some get this product. They're between 21 and 45, and these are people who already use marijuana recreationally, correct?
Have used marijuana before. We don't, whether they've used it medicinally or recreationally, that's not.
And then you're going to look at their heart rate, their blood pressure, and other physiological changes, and watch how the drug moves their body from the high to the come down.
The pharmacology that we're talking about is called pharmacodynamics, pharmacokinetics. The question is, okay, what happens to the product? What metabolites does in the presence of cannabinoids from our medication and the terpenoids, what's the body's reaction? What are the metabolites in the bloodstream after the medication is
And what are you
administered?
hoping to find out there?
The nature of research is just to find out exactly what's going on. So we're no longer guessing. We're no longer saying, gee, this seems to help PTSD or it seems to help some other.
And is PTSD one of the conditions?
PTSD is an approved condition in Connecticut. The veterans in Connecticut have been very supportive of the.
It's been such interesting stuff. I know this is way off the mark here, but it's so interesting. Psilocybin and even microdosing of LSD, all it's been written about how that can deal with PTSD. Now, obviously, the stakes are much higher because of the much bigger impacts it has on your body. And there you're going more for maybe, I guess, a core wrestling with the issues that led to the PTSD.
The other drugs, for better or worse, I don't know that they have had the same type of investigation, same time of clinical study.
Oh, not even close, right? I mean, no one's talking about it being legal at this point.
That's probably correct. It's, but again, that's not my expertise.
Right. Just in the last year, there's been so much interesting stuff written because of the book written about it. But so now in this study, why are you picking people who have already used marijuana? What's the reason you need them to have used it before?
It's simply being conservative. It's saying, okay, we don't want to introduce something to somebody who may have an adverse reaction. We would just keep it very simple.
Okay, so you don't have anyone freaking out.
Absolutely.
And then the people get a placebo. What are you hoping to find out? What's your scenario at the end of this part of the study?
Well, again, the first study,
it's for understanding how it metabolizes.
There are always there's a minimum of 3 studies to produce a new medication in the U.S. Sometimes 4, depending on many things. But the first phase is always about safety and dosing. So we use a dose, we make sure it's safe, then we move on and start to talk about specific conditions and specific results. And
what are we testing here exactly?
Well,
what kind of product?
In this study, we're testing CBD alone, THC alone, and various combinations of THC and CBD.
Okay. And the reason is that geared toward a certain product you have in mind, or is it more the formula that's going to underlie the product?
No, it's this is much more research oriented. It's much more finding out exactly how these materials or drugs
and
interact.
The reason private industry would be interested in this case, your company, is because with that further understanding, that will help you patent new drugs in the future.
Patenting in this industry is problematic, but we do, on the other hand, because it's a natural plant, patenting a natural plant has many issues. But we do see the opportunity for Connecticut to have a biotech industry based around this product, around this research, as long as we take the right steps. That is, we're not simply going to launch a PR campaign that says that this stuff might help you. That's insufficient to really get to something worthwhile, to make something grow. We understand, let's say, that there's been very little research of this quality done for the past 50 years. And the analogy I always use about a 50-year gap in something is, if we think about what a cell phone looked like in 1970, it
6 years ago.
It didn't look like much. So now we're talking about a 50-year gap in our knowledge of a plant, a series of compounds that obviously interact medically with our bodies. And we want to find out exactly what's going on so that we can get precise about, let's say, what dosage might help with Crohn's or PTSD or anything else.
And Pfizer was a good analogy because they're in New Haven. They do research, I believe, with Yale. how does a private company make sure that academic research is, excuse me, that when it funds academic research, how do you make sure that you're preserving the academic integrity?
Well, there are many steps between us and the research. So, for example, before our research gets approved to proceed, we do a great deal of background work in order to establish the to third-party satisfaction. For example, the FDA or a laboratory. We have to establish that we're making the same product consistently. If we can't show that, we'll never start. Then, within federal law, there is a requirement that we have something called Institutional Review Board approval.
IRBs, yeah.
IRBs, Institutional Review Boards, are established for every research institution, including Yale School of Medicine. So the Yale School of Medicine's Institutional Review Board had to look at at the material we were producing and at the protocols, the research protocols we were proposing, and they had to approve it.
And obviously, the concern isn't for you guys; it's for Yale's reputation. When they do industry-supported research, they have to prove that, to preserve their name, that they're not trying to produce a finding that will please its funders so they can get more funding, that they have credibility and independence.
Of course, and of course, there's concern for the patients. I mean, we're all concerned with making sure we do no harm.
All right.
We're trying to learn something, but we're not trying to hurt anybody.
We're talking about a groundbreaking study beginning at Yale Medical School in collaboration with CT Pharma, which produces medical marijuana, and Tom Schultz, the CEO and co-founder, is here telling us about it. So the second part of your trial is going to test pain relief by giving a group of adults 21 to 60 years old with chronic pain repeated dosing for a week. You're going to ask them about stress and pain and look at hormone responses and cardiovascular measures during regular visits to the lab. You might also look at PTSD and opioid use disorder. Tell me more about why you're doing that second part, Deanne.
Well, the second part is, again, once we're past the first, the second part will examine pain and stress, but a very specific pain and stress, which will be caused by ice water. The pain and stress is simply has the subject, the human participant, put his or her hand into ice water, which causes a certain kind of pain and a certain amount of stress, depending on let's say the worry as to how long the hand might have to remain in the ice water.
So so who would want to do a study subjecting themselves to that pain?
Well, with this, like all other similar studies, we rely on volunteers who are paid. So they go through something that we can assure them is not going to do them any permanent harm.
So it's not like big pain with ice water, is it?
No.
It's just discomfort.
It's discomfort. Yes.
And how does that relate to PTSD and opioid use disorder?
We're not there yet. Once we get through our first two parts of our phase 1 and we find out that our product is safe and everybody's satisfied with the results, now we go to phase 2. Now we might be, let's say, specifically examining how this works on patients with PTSD or how it might help with opioid use disorder. But those are future subjects. We're not there yet.
And when does this all begin? Are you looking for the volunteers yet? How does someone get involved?
The School of Medicine is looking for volunteers as we speak.
And is there a website people can go to?
That I'm
guessing we could go to the Yale Interdisciplinary Stress Center.
That's probably a good place to start.
Is your role just funding it, or what's your role?
Our role is to produce the medication, and we've worked for 5 years, literally, to get this through to this point now. This didn't start last week. This started 5 years ago.
And is there a name for the medication you're producing?
At this point, no. It's simply Connecticut Pharmaceuticals product.
And how long is this going to take?
The first two parts of the phase 1 will be finished before April 1st.
Wow. Okay.
So we'll know by then. We'll announce the results.
You guys aren't messing around.
Well, it's been a long time coming.
How much money is it costing you?
A lot.
Okay. And we're talking about that with Tom Schultz, CEO of CT Pharma. So how'd you get involved in this? You were a Wall Street lawyer and investment banker. How did a Wall Street lawyer and investment banker end up running a cutting-edge medical marijuana company in Connecticut? That's a change.
Well, after 18 years there, I spent 14 years at Dickinson Brands, which, as you might know, produces witch hazel in Connecticut. And
That's one of those products we grew up with. It just seemed normal as everything we never hear about. Yeah,
In
Be a lot of
Connecticut,
uses for it.
certainly in Connecticut. And there, the witch hazel is an over-the-counter. It's regulated as an over-the-counter drug by the FDA. So let's say I became rather familiar with the FDA and its regulations. And then when the state of Connecticut offered up applications for its licenses for medical marijuana in a system that would meet FDA standards, let's just say I thought I was extremely familiar with the FDA standards that they were talking about, and we proceeded to write an application.
Why did you want to do it? Why did you want to do it?
Because I honestly perceived this 50-year gap in research. So from the beginning, Rino Ferrarese, the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of our company, and I each saw the opportunity to pursue research from the beginning. In the beginning...
Did it seem more fun or more valuable after having acquired the knowledge of how to raise capital, how to deal with the FDA, how to do regulation? Did you feel, some people feel like you want to use your talents and the experience to do something to better society? I mean, was any of that factoring in? What was going on in your life that you wanted to do this?
Very much so. I mean, I'd say both Reno and I saw the opportunity to, let's say, do well by doing good. That is...
And how'd you know each other?
We worked together in the Witch Hazel Company.
Uh-huh.
But we wrote the application together. And from the beginning, the legislation that Connecticut passed in 2012 did not include research. So we could sell product to then 6 dispensaries, but we could not send anything to Yale, even to examine in a petri dish.
Wow.
It was just illegal. So we worked with the DCP, who supported the effort to bring research into the picture. We worked with the legislature, and that was all successful. But then, as we say, we see the opportunity, given this 50-year gap in knowledge, we see the opportunity to close the gap and hopefully not only to help patients, but also to bring a biotech industry, bring a growing industry to Connecticut, which we would very much like to see here.
All right. And finally, before I let you go, we talked about myths and misunderstandings about medical marijuana. People often don't distinguish between recreational marijuana. So Connecticut's becoming an island. Around us are states that legalize recreational use of marijuana. Our previous governor at least had a strong feeling that he believed in medical marijuana, but he felt that it was a mistake to have recreational marijuana. How do you encounter that confusion, and how do you address it?
Well, the black market's been there all of this time. And there's certainly been a 50-year black market in recreational marijuana. That has nothing to do with us. We have nothing to do with it. And any more than a legitimate pharmaceutical producer, if it sees its products being misused or sold on the black market, that should be a grave concern. For us, all of our product goes to dispensaries. None of it goes anywhere else. And we're very concerned with both the results for the patients that get our product now and with the potential for research and what that could mean not only for our company, but to the entire state.
How would it have affected your business and your approach if Governor Malloy hadn't stopped the move to legalize recreational marijuana the way Massachusetts did and others around us? How would it affect you if Connecticut does take that step?
If it does, I would probably end up with a larger facility furnishing whichever legitimate channels the state
So you'd be interested in going
establishes.
to that market if it's legal?
That would probably be part of the program the state sets up, but right now, even then, we would still be focused on research.
All right. Well, thanks for informing me and our listeners more about this industry. A lot of us know very little about it, even though we see the headlines about it. Tom Schultz, CEO of CT Pharma, a new presence in New Haven with clinical trials coming up about the medical use of marijuana. And anyone who wants to get involved, I would recommend starting with the website of the Yale Interdisciplinary Stress Center at the Yale School of Medicine. Thanks for joining us. It was a real pleasure to meet you, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
And thanks to the man behind the controls, Brian Slattery, doing extra duty all week and keeping us on multiple platforms. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.